CNN's infamously smug MAGA stooge, Scott Jennings, was humiliated in a debate on a CNN panel by, among other people, another Republican commentator, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, got a couple of clips to play here. As you know, Scott Jennings, a former Mitch McConnell employee, is the smuggest Trump supporter in legacy media, and that includes anybody on Fox. And he's usually humiliated by CNN host Abby Phillip or CNN guest Bakari Sellers, or, more often than not, Catherine Rampell, CNN economics correspondent, Washington Post correspondent. But what was interesting about this one is he was humiliated by Tara Setmeyer, who used to be a Republican communications director on Capitol Hill. So this is another Republican. And I want to play these clips and unpack them together. It's a lot of fun.
Listen, 85% of federal workers work outside of Washington, D.C. Those are people who work at our national parks. Those are people who work on, the ag departments in farm bureau states. Those are people who are taking care of Medicaid and processing payments for people in red states like where Donald Trump lives. So we need to stop being so cavalier, Scott, about people and whether they're working or not and how come they're so upset about getting an email. Because these are people's livelihoods.
Because some are being cavalier.
You have the privilege of sitting here getting a six-figure paycheck from CNN.
And I have to show up every day. And I have to show up and earn it. And I have to show up and earn it.
As public servants, and they do the same.
And I have to show up.
And the fact that you assume that they don't is obnoxious and insulting to those people.
They're not showing up and earning it?
They're good public servants.
Hold on.
Why are you assuming?
Listen.
So her point is listen, believe it or not, government servants are still American citizens. They're still human beings. And of course, it's so easy to demonize federal workers. Oh my God, they work for the government. Well, a lot of them are Republican and Democrat. They're people. They're men and women who have feelings and have beliefs, and they show up and try to do their best at a job that they believe is beneficial and that Republican and Democratic administrations have worked for. And by the way, Scott, you're at the height of privilege here. You get paid, a six-figure income to go on CNN and lie your ass off in defense of Donald Trump. Well, I have to show up again. Well, how do you know that these workers don't do the same thing? And he's like, well, I don't know. Well, then why are you defending this hatchet job from Doge and Elon Musk? Maybe you should be demanding proof from Doge and Musk. Like, whoa. Okay, fire them if they're useless or, if they're not productive or whatever, but show me the proof before you fire them. Why don't you demand that, Scott Jennings? Of course, because you're an unprincipled, hypocritical loser, and you should be made fun of. So here's another clip.
In context, though, this is after just in the first few days of the administration, they received a buyout offer that then wasn't really a buyout offer. Then it was very confusing.
No, now, it's not. They got a buyout if they want.
There's colleagues all over the country being fired in a haphazard way. There's probationary workers being fired, supposedly for performance issues when nobody is actually evaluating their performance. Then this email goes out. Then the agency heads say, no, don't answer the email. Don't you find it don't you think it would be a little bit stressful right now to be a federal worker, to be a park ranger? Yes.
And there
to be a federal worker.
It's a hell of a lot more stressful than
Okay,
this
is
episode number 175. Democrats dying on the Hill.
Joe, Tara, and Scott, and Anna. Everybody, hold on one second.
Your colleagues fired. It is stressful to be working
No air
at the
traffic controllers were
NIH.
fired. That's a lie.
It is stressful to be.
Not one. Name one.
Scientists were fired.
Elon Musk
Yesterday, I
tonight.
read it in the Miami Herald this
Hang on a
weekend.
second. Elon Musk.
So we do know that air traffic support staff were purged by the FBI agents have been fired. Law enforcement personnel have been potentially furloughed as well. So this idea, yes, these are valued people in a high stress situation sometimes, and also just key personnel in general. And again, this absurd demand of Scott Jennings. Well, I want you to prove that the people who were fired were essential or that they have stressful jobs. No, that's not the burden, man. The burden is that you need to prove that their jobs constitute waste, fraud, and abuse before you fire these American citizens, these American workers. Or just simply because they work for the federal government doesn't mean that they're demonic or subhuman or substandard or entitled to fewer considerations than other people do. And Scott has no evidence for this. Scott just assumes blithely that this can't possibly be true because he doesn't want the facts to get in the way of his feelings. So here's another clip and this one's a little bit longer, but it's an interesting back and forth between Scott and the others.
Career civil servants. There are career civil servants who work with one president and another, and do so for the Constitution and the love of country.
Hold on a second. Among Democrats and Republican presidents, there are certain agencies that are statutorily independent from politics. That's the same whether it's Republican or Democrat.
You're saying that the bureaucracy is as responsive to Republican or Trump priorities as Democratic?
Is that what I said? No, it's not.
You're saying that bias doesn't exist, and I disagree.
Scott, let me just repeat what I said. There are certain agencies, regardless of the president, that are statutorily independent from politics because they deal with things that pertain to the American public, and there needs to be continuity, regardless of who the
Federal
president is.
Reserve,
the Federal
Postal
Reserve,
Commission.
the Security and Exchange Commission. Right. There are plenty of agencies that are like that.
But an email doesn't jeopardize continuity of government.
And there are.
Yes. So again, this is so stupid and dishonest from Scott and this other, the one Republican who agrees with Scott here. So administrations change January 20th every 4 years, right? So again, we had one here January 20th, 2025 as a consequence of the November 2024 election. We don't have 100% turnover from one administration to the next because you have nonpartisan experienced career civil servants in the Department of Defense, for example, that keep running the military and keep up national security as we transition from one administration to the other. It would be the height of stupidity, typical Republican stupidity, to say, no, they all got to go. They're all like, partisan Democratic shills, right? And again, the logic is so stupid. Imagine that a Democrat had won. Imagine Kamala Harris had won the last election. Or imagine that in 2028, a Democrat wins the next election. Will Scott Jennings be sitting in that CNN chair saying, yes, absolutely, the Democratic president has every right to fire all the people that Trump hired and just purge the entire government and fill them again with Democrats? No, that's not what he would be advocating for. And again, just offers no evidence for his claims whatsoever. Just this ridiculous incredulity. Like, why do we have to have continuity of government just because, we need people in the Department of Defense and, the Federal Reserve and directing fiscal and financial policy, irrespective of politics? So stupid. Yes, we do need those things.
Many federal employees that are civil servants, meaning that they don't come in because of partisan politics. That's there to protect you as a conservative and Tara as a liberal.
I'm sorry, I think
it's there to protect both of you.
I hear your debating point. I think it is incredibly naive to believe that there are not civil service bureaucrats who would love nothing more than to thwart this president for 4 years and wait for a Democrat.
Then why are Republican senators worried about it also then? They're not liberals.
I'll tell you why. Because there's almost 1 million federal workers in red states. You think that the people working at the border have a bias pro-Democrats? You think people working for USDA in Miami have a bias for Democrats?
Answer the email. Answer the email.
So again, he has no response for it because he's just outmatched. He's a liar. He's outmatched on the facts. They're smarter than he is. It's so sad to see in real time. Every Democrat or every bureaucrat that works with the federal government, it's actually just a closet Democrat. They want to stymie God Emperor Trump. No, loser. Yes, there are people in the federal government that have a pro-Democrat bias, no doubt. There are also people in the federal government that have a pro-Republican bias. And the hope is that they curtail their biases and just do their jobs professionally. Now, if you have evidence that a particular bureaucrat is just flagrantly flouting the law and behaving in unprofessional ways in order to sabotage a Republican or Democratic administrations, that's a separate story because then it's a specific claim for a specific person and you have specific evidence to corroborate it. You don't have that here, and you're just tarring and feathering, hundreds, if not thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people for no damn reason whatsoever, simply because right now, in the short term, that benefits your cult leader. But turnabout is fair play. What happens when a Democrat goes in and says, you know what? I'm firing all these Trump supporters. I'm replacing them with, blue-haired college, students with nose rings and stuff like that who took, who have degrees in gender philosophy or whatever the conservative stereotype is. Scott Jennings would be pissed. But he doesn't care about principle. It's all about owning the libs, no matter what the long-term damage is to this country. Here's another clip.
I expect Kash Patel is going to be a hands-on manager, but if I may address one issue. You just denigrated Bongino's law enforcement credentials. He was a cop and a Secret Service agent. You denigrated his academic credentials. He has a master's degree.
Just because he was a police officer doesn't make him qualified to run a 38,000 person, $11 billion budget agency, just like Pete Hegseth.
But you know what does? Because he
National Guardsman or everyone doesn't either. Thank you for your service.
The confidence and the pleasure of the president.
Whose judgment is terrible.
And I'm sorry that you are not yet over the outcome of the election.
No, because look at what's happening to our country. And I'll never be over it, Scott. This is dismantling our democracy in front of our eyes, and you guys are okay with it.
You had a city that was smaller than...
I expect Kash Patel is going to be a hands-on manager.
Again, the irony there, again, just Scott Jennings being so smug. Sorry you can't get over the last election. Dude, the last time you all lost an election, you all tried to overthrow the government. You are morally inferior to Democrats. Scott Jennings just simply is. He's morally inferior, and his, cultish vibe is without comparability in the Democratic Party. We accepted the outcome of the election. We publicly and privately conceded. There was no insurrection. There was no attempt to unlawfully keep Joe Biden or Kamala Harris in power. They invited him to the White House. They attended the inauguration. They endured his passive-aggressive insults, and power was transferred over because elected Democrats are morally superior to elected Republicans, Scott. It just, again, and he knows it. Scott Jennings is not stupid. Yes, he's dumber than the other conservatives on that panel, I suppose, with the possible exception of that other pro-Trump guy, but he's not stupid. He understands that Donald Trump is dumber and morally inferior to every elected Democrat who has ever lived. He knows that, but it's all about trying to own the libs in real time. This idea that he can't defend Dan Bongino, far-right podcaster, on the merits. Well, he was a police officer. Okay, what's your point? Lloyd Austin was a decorated combat veteran, but you don't think that Lloyd Austin was a good Secretary of Defense because, again, the standard changes, right? Oh, you must think that Dan Bongino was, a really good Deputy FBI Director because he was a police officer. That doesn't make any sense, right? Because as Deputy FBI Director, you're not just a beat cop. You're not slapping handcuffs on people. You're an administrator. You run the day-to-day operations of the FBI. And again, Scott Jennings presumably knows that, but he has to simp for Donald Trump and anything that Donald Trump does. It's an embarrassing position in which he finds himself, but he's very good at being smug in that regard. Let's do one last clip. Let's do one last clip from this panel, and we'll unpack it together.
It was bad. I said what he did was
that's
bad.
But it's also bad that Enrique Tarrio did this.
Right, then you made a false equivalency. There is no fault. No, you got your chance, and I'm going to have mine right now about this. For the law enforcement officers who lost their careers, who almost lost their lives, who protected those ungrateful bastards that day that are now pardoned, like Enrique Tarrio, who was convicted of seditious conspiracy. He's the traitor. And anyone who defends what they did or tries to make a false equivalency, actually, they are traitors to this country and our Constitution. And every law enforcement officer that puts on the badge that defends our democracy. How dare you and anyone else that tries to make a false equivalency with people like the January 6th rioters who were pardoned by the same president you want us to have confidence in his judgment? He pardoned seditious conspiracy traitors.
She's so good. That was great. And again, that's from a fellow Republican. So yeah, I'd love to see Scott Jennings humiliated in real time again. He's always outmatched in the debate, always outmatched on the facts. And they should have Tara Setmeyer on more often. Anna Navarro is always great. Catherine Rampell is the GOAT as far as I'm concerned. She wasn't on this one. Hopefully she'll be on another one soon. And of course, in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.